An honor to be here. My name is Jen Ray. I'm from the Center for Reworlding. I am your facilitator, your moderator, your dramaturg, your choreographer of like human movement in this 90-minute session. Okay. As protocol, I want to extend my respects to elders and any other Indigenous people from the world regions joining us today. I'm an artist and a researcher of Indigenous descent, the Métis people from Turtle Island, otherwise known as Canada, and I'm based on unceded Jara country in Australia. So we have live interpretation in French and Spanish, courtesy of CARITAS Internationalis. There will be at least one intervention today that'll be in Spanish. For those of you requiring interpretation, please log into the Zoom link there using that QR code and using your headset and your own phone. You can use the conference Wi-Fi for that. This side event came together from a number of dynamic people, multi-stakeholder groups, and cross-regional organizing team members, including leading by the platform for the platform on disaster and displacement, jointly with CARITAS Internationalis, the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, known as SEDIMA, the International Displacement Monitoring Center, the IDMC, the International Organization for Migration, IOM, the Pacific Women's Indigenous Network, WIN, the Government of the Philippines, and the Center for Reworlding. All right. Got a little bit of a, there we go. So we have housekeeping, which we at the Center for Reworlding like to call joy keeping. This hybrid event with all of you folks joining us here in person is also online. Hello to everybody online. If you wouldn't mind muting your microphones, and in the chat, if you don't mind just saying where you're from. I think there's about 30 people joining us right now. This event will also be recorded and be available on the YouTube channel of the PDD. All right, we have another QR code for you. I'm going to let you have a little bit of a break today from note-taking because it's a big week. All of the resources and the presentations and so forth will be made available via this QR code to a link tree. And at the end of this session, I'll make sure that that gets up there as well so you can see it again. There we go. And our program will also be sketch written live by Mr. Josh Knowles, who's joining us from the UK. He's there online in the background. Hey, Josh, how you going? We'll be seeing you a little bit later. All right. Ready, set, go. As we all know, it's become starkly apparent that the challenges of climate change, that they pose it's far more severe, more complex than we originally anticipated. A lot of the existing systems and the ways of thinking are poorly equipped to deal with the scale and scope of increasing disaster events and displacement worldwide. What we might figuratively call in Australia a bin fire, or in America you might hear as a dumpster fire. So without this luxury of time, there's an urgency in finding new ways to collaborate, experiment, plan, and shift the paradigm of how we might mitigate, respond, and adapt to what we might call these desperate times. Should we be worried? That's a good question. Indigenous scholar Leanne Bedmasawoki-Simpson, she says that we need an extensive, rigorous, and profound reorganizing of all things. And so in essence, it's going to take all the skills, knowledges, cultural ways, influence capabilities, our faiths and our lived experiences working together in collaboration. Sociologist Matthias Gross explains that for these diverse knowledges to be conceptually connected, the model or platform should take form in the form of an experiment. So not haphazard, but more strategic. And it works best whenever the aim of whatever is being achieved is problem-focused, context-driven, and transdisciplinary in nature. And so where all the actors are integrated in every step of the process. So why did I tell you this? This logic brings us to today's session on displacement and disasters, participation and innovation for resilience. The form of this session is experimental in nature. And I thank Sarah, Shireen, Hannah, Sadisha, Eric, and the other presenters and organizers for playing in the dark, which we'll get to later. So, the Joy Work Report excuse me, my presenting tool. Today we're going to hear from firsthand stories of displacement from Bangladesh and Chile. We're going to engage with global and regional disaster displacement data. We're going to experience cultural expressions from Tonga and Malawi. We're going to have a keynote on creative measures in desperate times and examine effective community-led practices in the Philippines and some of the collaborative efforts that are happening in the Caribbean. So the invitation to you is to listen to the challenges as they're being faced in some of the regions. Listen to what the data is telling us and not telling us. Look at the methods and the approaches that some of these participatory and relational and collaborative ways that some of our correspondents are doing address some of these challenges. So focus on the hows, not necessarily on the what and the whys. Consider what ideas that could be seated here could look like in 100 years if we had the mobility and the motion, because our future generations need us to do this hard work. And somewhere in here where you, we, us are listening and being in this room together, we might start to find, the joy and tenderness and humility in these desperate times to find transformational ways to disrupt business as usual paradigms. Oops, should I be worried? Here we go. So, up first is in this segment of the Joy Work Report, we're going to hear a testimonial story of displacement and from our partner correspondents, Mr. Alex Chipura from CARITAS Bangladesh and Ms. Kathy Melta from CARITAS Chile, followed by a special bulletin from Ms. Christelle Cazabat from IDMC, giving us an overview of the latest figures in relation to disaster displacement.
I came to Khulna in 2009 after losing everything for Cyclone Ayla. Coming to Khulna, I stood by the roadside, filled with uncertain hope. Mujibur and Jamal, the owners of a rice mill, asked me, "Where will you go?" With tears in my eyes, I replied, "I have nowhere to go. I just want to work to support my children." They comforted me and offered me a job at their rice mill along with a place to stay next to the mill. Before coming here in Khulna, my life was stable. I had everything: my house, poultry, and land. But in 2009, the cyclone Ayla swept everything away: my home, land, and all that I had. With the help of the rice mill owner, I have been working here from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. since 2009. I earn 40 taka, about 33 US dollars cents, per day. I have my government national ID card, but don't have access to receive government safety net services and other basic government services with this here in city.
Okay, Alex, welcome. So you've brought us Nirvana's testimony. It's one story of many that you probably hear in the 15 years of your practices and the different programs that you've done in terms of humanitarian aid, DRR, and CA programs. But you have more to share with us.
Okay, sorry. Good morning to all. So you have seen, the scenario of a displaced family, Nurbanu, where she is staying for more than 15 years with same ways from the rice mill. So what you see about her suffering, so like her, let me ask to guess that how many families like Nurbanu out of 171 million people in Bangladesh. So I will let you know, but let me check and let me take you to more information on Nurbanu. So that is quite corner, southern part of Bangladesh. It is a Khulna district, one of the coastal districts out of 19 coastal districts in Bangladesh. there, Nurbanu, where stay, that is a Santi, small, only 11 square meter house. That is only one room, without any ventilation. The house is made of basically very informal, in very informal settlement, made of bamboo, tarpaulin, and CGI seed only, without any sorts of facilities like basic was. More than 40 families are have access to only two bathrooms and only two water points. So, like her, in Bangladesh, let me know. I would like to let you know that in Bangladesh, more than 8 million families. That means around it can be 60 million people who are displaced, basically climate migrants. So why it is? Because in Bangladesh we are one of the the climate induced impacted country, one of the countries in Bangladesh. So we have drought, cyclone, and floods, which is now very recent years, last 10 years, we have been experiencing very frequently. So just 15 years back, if you look in Bangladesh, the return period of cyclone is almost 10 years. Now it is almost every year. Even flood also 4 to 5 years now, every year we are experiencing. What happened that? Due to the climatic events, the displacement is happening. So every year, every day, the informal settlements, especially the urban setup, are receiving more than 2,000 people who are especially migrants and also displaced population. So what happened then?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Now over to Latin America. Welcome, Buenvenida, Ms. Kati Mela from CARITAS. Sorry, I'm just going to take my glasses off because I've got the difference. I can see better here. CARITAS Chile, joining us for the Joy Work Report, this segment on displacement stories. We're happy you can join us to share some of your work. This is also, we'll have the English slides up here, but you can tap in if you want to hear in Spanish. Thank you.
Thank you. Hola a todos y todas. Hoy quiero compartir este tema de resiliencia, participación e innovación comunitaria para la prevención del desplazamiento climático. Los efectos del cambio climático se hacen cada vez más evidentes en las condiciones de vida de las comunidades, especialmente las más vulnerables, siendo uno de los mayores desafíos para la sociedad en la actualidad. Los fenómenos naturales que afectan a las comunidades generan consecuencias ambientales de gran daño e impacto, tanto en la habitabilidad de los territorios, infraestructuras de servicios básicos, como en la pérdida de cultivos, ganado y otros. Estos impulsan a las personas a desplazarse dentro de sus propias fronteras o fuera de sus países en busca de nuevas oportunidades y condiciones de vida segura. Perdimos todo. El agua se llevó lo que teníamos. Ese día nos tuvimos que ir. Mujer de 65 años, comuna de Alicantén, región del Maule, Chile, inundaciones junio 2023. Chile, debido a su geografía y extensa costa, es uno de los países más vulnerables al cambio climático, cumpliendo con 7 de los 9 criterios de vulnerabilidad definidos por la Convención Marco de las Naciones Unidas sobre Cambio Climático. En los últimos años, el país se ha visto afectado por la sequía, el aumento del nivel del mar, olas de calor, inundaciones e incendios forestales, fenómenos que se repiten en los países vecinos. Vengo de Río Grande do Sul, Porto Alegre. Me vine para Curitiba por un futuro mejor para mis hijos. Tengo 3 hijos. Allá por las lluvias perdí mis cosas del hogar, camas, muebles. Los niños se me enfermaron por la humedad. No podían ir a la escuela. Ya llevo 3 meses en Curitiba. Mujer de 30 años, Curitiba, Brasil. Inundaciones mayo 2024, Porto Alegre, Río Grande do Sul, Brasil. Para enfrentar esta realidad es imprescindible una acción climática urgente que permita un futuro habitable para todos y todas. No podemos seguir concentrando los esfuerzos solo en la respuesta a emergencias. Es necesario trabajar con la población más vulnerable para acompañarlos en el conocimiento de sus riesgos y habilitarles para prevenir o disminuir los impactos de las catástrofes. El fuego nos rodeó. El calor era muy fuerte. No sé cómo salimos con vida. Todo era un caos. Mujer de 50 años, comuna de Quilpué, región de Valparaíso, Chile. Incendios forestales, febrero 2024. En este escenario, fortalecer la resiliencia ya no es una opción, es una necesidad. Dedicar recursos a la resiliencia no es un gasto, es una inversión. Pero, ¿estamos dispuestos a invertir en resiliencia para una gestión del riesgo más oportuna? Hoy queremos compartir una acción transformadora desde la participación y la resiliencia comunitaria que promueve cambios en la forma en cómo estamos habitando en el territorio. Aquí, Botania, donde viven mis papás, al lado del jardín botánico, se quemó todo alrededor. Se salvaron en gran manera por el trabajo preventivo de un proyecto con CONAF y CARITAS Chile. La única forma de sobrevivir a estos eventos es en comunidad. Incendios forestales, febrero 2024. Este es un ejemplo concreto que cuando se fortalece la resiliencia comunitaria y se trabaja colaborativamente con todos los actores presentes en el territorio, se salvan vidas, se salvan los bienes, se cuida el ecosistema y se previene el desplazamiento climático. La clave del éxito de esta experiencia, o el milagro, como lo llamaron los medios de comunicación social, está en la implementación de un modelo territorial que promueve la resiliencia, la participación y la innovación, especialmente en el contexto de la crisis climática y la gestión del riesgo. Los aspectos clave de este modelo territorial para la gestión comunitaria están en las personas, en las familias, está en la comunidad. Este modelo territorial es un proceso de transformación que comienza con el fortalecimiento de organizaciones territoriales de base y el liderazgo comunitario para la formación de una estructura dedicada a la gestión del riesgo, denominado Comité Local. A continuación, se realiza un proceso de formación comunitaria y un análisis participativo del riesgo de desastre. Posteriormente, se lleva a cabo la planificación comunitaria para la implementación de medidas concretas a nivel local basada en el análisis realizado en la etapa anterior. Ello vinculando a la comunidad con los municipios y otras organizaciones con presencia en los territorios. Finalmente, se implementan acciones locales innovadoras, financiadas mediante un pequeño fondo de inversión, proporcionado para que el equipo comunitario lo administre. De esta forma, podemos reducir el riesgo y prevenir el desplazamiento climático. Todos tenemos que cuidarnos. Somos todos responsables del otro. Entre todos hacemos comunidad. Tenemos que ser capaces de actuar articulada y colaborativamente implementando acciones transformadoras en los territorios. Directora CARITAS Los Ángeles, región del Biobío, Chile, incendios forestales, febrero 2023. Para finalizar y puedan conocer más de lo que hacemos, en este QR pueden encontrar publicaciones que hemos realizado desde CARITAS Chile. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Katie, and to Alex for those displacement stories from Asia and Latin America. We might be wondering how many people out there are like Nibanu and what this phenomena is that we're talking about. We have some of our latest figures here. Joining us now in the special bulletin is Christelle Casaba from the IDMC to give us an overview of some of the latest figures. Crystal, what is the data telling us? What are some of the gaps, the things that we know, we don't know, and what are sort of some of the emerging trends and future implications of the data?
Thank you, Jen. What the data is telling us is The other way. This. The data is telling us, the data we are able to access is telling us that nearly 265 million displacements linked with disasters occurred in the past decade alone. And as you can see from this map, those displacements really happened all around the world. Virtually in any country and territory, in any region, high and low income communities have been affected by disasters. The disasters that prompted most displacement were actually storms and floods. Together, these two hazards led to around 90% of the total number of disaster displacement that we have on record. But we also have many other hazards that lead to displacements, for instance, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, droughts, and sea level rise. For some of those, we have very little information actually. So what the data is not telling us is the true scale of the phenomenon. And what that map was showing you is not the reality. It's only what we are able to capture. But that can really be misleading. Because, for instance, if you take this graph here, you're asking me about transgen, and I am trying to give you a sense of how has disaster displacement evolved over the past decade. The best I can do is show you the data that we have on record. And this is what you see here. This is not the number of disaster displacement that happened. This is the number of disaster displacement that we were able to record. As you can see, there has been an increase. It's not consistent year in and year out, but there has been an increase over the past decade. Now, of course, this increase can be linked with devastating events that occurred and prompted millions of displacements. But it can also be due to the better availability of data. And many countries actually over the past decade have invested in strong monitoring systems that are allowing us to capture more displacement, resulting in higher figures. This also includes evacuations. Now, as you all know, evacuations are life-saving. We, of course, are not calling for less displacement, meaning less evacuations. But those evacuations are included in these figures. So what this graph can also be showing you is that more countries have invested in better evacuations, early warning systems, and therefore saving lives, leading to higher numbers of displacements. It's basically one of my main messages here is that there's a lot that the data is not telling us. We right now cannot tell you the percentage in those bars that are covered by evacuations and the percentage that is covered by protracted displacement, people actually unable to return home after some time, after days, after weeks, after years sometimes, who will require specific and often long-term support. We do not know that. We do not know who are behind most of these figures. What these figures are showing you is the number of movements, the number of forced movements of people who had to leave their homes because of a disaster. But some people are forced to leave several times, sometimes several times in the same year, if they live in disaster-prone areas. What the data, again, is not showing you here, but that we do know because of testimonies like the ones we just heard and also more research that has been done in particular areas, is that disaster displacement affects those most vulnerable more severely and more often. Often, as I said, repeatedly. So this is something that the data is hinting at, but we do need more information to really make the case for better support to poorer communities, lower and middle income countries, and so on. I would also like to stop with this final slide to tell you what the data is not telling us. What you see here is an estimation of the risk of future disaster displacement. What our latest disaster displacement risk model can say is that we expect 32 million people on average to be displaced in any given year in the future because of these four hazards here: riverine and coastal floods, droughts, and cyclonic winds. We expect also that in an optimistic climate change scenario, this figure will double, and in a pessimistic scenario, it might triple. But this is not the future. This is an estimation. This does not tell you what this figure could look like with the right policies, the right evidence to inform these policies and the support to displaced people, and also the right investments in disaster risk reduction, recovery, resilience, better support, and solutions for displacement. So please do not take this as a sign of what we are headed towards, but rather what we should fight against. And maybe I will stop here as a call for action with this final picture. Back to you, Jen.
We all just need to take a collective deep breath. So the numbers look bad. The outlook too. All regions are affected. And how do people cope with disasters and displacement? Well, this is a really good moment to take that pause and look at the role of culture and the arts in this space. We're going to have some cultural expressions from the Pacific and Africa. Then we're going to go into some creative measures relating to the Pacific, a dance from Miss Makalisi Nata and a poem from Chimamwe Sakuda from CARITAS Malawi. And then we're going to have a keynote after this. So you can sit back, and I'm going to now introduce Makalisi Nata. It's an honor to introduce you. Yeah, while I'm doing the introductions, then you can enjoy the performance as well. Thank you. So Miss Makalisi Nata, his ancestral home is Tonga, born in Aotearoa in New Zealand. Makalisi is a human rights defender, climate mobility activist, and here today representing the Pacific Migration Partners, including the Pacific Youth Platform in Migration. I'm going to hand the microphone over to you now, Makalisi.
Whakamalo lahi atu Jen. Malo lele, talofa lava, kia orana, whakalofa lahi atu, and warm Pacific greetings to you all. In the heart of the Pacific, our islands breathe stories of migration, of resilience, of land and ocean, of loss and healing. These are not just academic themes or global challenges. They are lived realities for our peoples. Today's Tawalunga is rooted in the graceful and dignified traditions of Tonga and Samoa. It is more of a performance. It is a living archive. It speaks to the memory and the mourning of the volcanic eruption that took place in the island of Hungaha'apai and the island of Atata. Lives were lost, homes were uprooted, livelihoods disrupted. But from this, we continue to rise through culture, through community, and through voice. Our people have always danced in truths and told their stories through Taolunga and of the displacement and the earth's power, but also of our cultural survival. In every gesture, every sway of the hands, every movement of the eyes, there is memory, there is mourning, there is also mana. As Pacific peoples, we are not passive victims of climate catastrophe. We are knowledge holders, artists, navigators, and warriors of ancestral wisdom, cultural arts like the Taolunga. Let this dance and this moment of gathering remind us that while land may shake and waters may rise, the soul of the Pacific stands firm, adorned in tapa, grounded in tradition and reaching forward with purpose. Malo apito whawhetai lava vinaka wakalevu.
Matangi vale unga tonga unga apai ho omo fie me ape na amomohe e mohe fie mali e pe amo fo hake ko e whakatuputani pe amo fo hake ko e whakatuputani pe ka foa e loto he mamahi pe amo e atamai haki ngai uano au o sanuani haku o moho utamaki ai akai akili sitahi onaha umoe mo ungafi ia te mautali pehe kono mafi ia te mautali pehe kono mafi e si tonga e kei monu ia te ongo e loa kone takawhia mo le hono lano mata pe apulia tangi alo i mata mo e utofia pe i tuku kilangi pe ata fia fia koe o tua motonga pe ko hota tofia koe o tua motonga pe ko hota tofia Akai akili sitahi olaha umoe mo ungafi ia te mautali pehe kono mafi ia te mautali pehe kono mafi tuki e pea ukulaha ke utahono ana tafiwe oseni
Thank you, Sister Mercy, for sharing your dance and as well as being a message keeper from the Pacific and all of the back work that you did with your elders to bring this gift to us today. Now there's going to be a lay ceremony you're going to give to our distinguished guests. And I'd like to invite envoy to the chair of the PDD, Professor Walter Kalin, and head of the PDD secretary, Mr. Alte Solberg, from Mike Khaleesi to present these lays to you. Okay, So from the Pacific to Africa, we're joined online now from Chimwemwe Sekunda, Director of CARITAS Malawi, to read a poem for us today. Hello, Chimwemwe. Thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, my name is Chimwemwe from Malawi, and I'm happy to be here to share with you experiences in Malawi through a poem, which I titled The Daughters of the Soil, Regardless They Stand. They rise as the darkness still lingers, before dawn dares to whisper, fetching water and the wood to light the fire, burden young, yet spirits high with songs on their lips. Fearless, they brave the walk with hopeful eyes. In gardens they talk, their hands embrace the cracked dry earth with hope for production. Flood may rage and drought may bite, yet they stand firm whilst giving hope to the hopeless. When rivers swell and storms descend, they armor the homes, they heal and they mend. A mother's arm and a sister's care, a leader's voice bold and fair, yet no one cares. They weave the nets that safety brings. They teach, they guide, they rise and sing. When hope is hopeless, they light the way. With the resilient head, they keep smiling and yet breathing inside. So hear their call, let justice prevail. Give wings to the dreams, break binding ties. For when she stands, the nation trembles. A future bright with refreshed energies and hope. Thank you so much. That's the end of my poem.
Marseille, yeah, thank you for joining us from so far away, and for sharing your poem.
You're most welcome.
All right. So this takes us to this next session. Eric, can we just, thank you very much. Great. So this would be what we would call a keynote, and I am now switching hats and doing a keynote for you today. This here, so the role of culture and the arts. So there's a lot of evidence in terms of the role of culture and the arts in terms of social change, especially around disaster recovery specifically, and also engaging in difficult subject matter. And so you can think of things like Charles Dickens' novels, which impacted, child labor laws, or the poem in Rachel Carlson's Silent Spring, which influenced a lot of women to get into science. Some of the freedom songs from the end of apartheid. So how can artists interpret, this turbulent and complex world that we're in? And how can we, as artists and communities, work together to build more resilience? So from a social science perspective, what we can look at here is that socially engaged practices can deal with some of the complex and challenging content. And how this often happens is through cognition, affect, and behavior working complementary and synergistically. So the Center for Research on Environmental Decisions said this quite a long time ago. They said that in order for the public to fully absorb some of these complex challenges, such as climate risk, displacement, disasters, that it must actively be communicated through appropriate language, metaphor, analogy, combined with narrative storytelling, made vivid through visual imagery or experiential scenarios, and that it can be balanced with scientific information, often delivered through trusted messengers in group settings. So artists and other cultural producers, this is our gig. We're meaning makers, we're crafters of experience, we're provocateurs, adept at dealing with uncertainty and complexity. We're agile and responsive thinkers who see risk, failure, and critique as fuel in terms of creative processes. And most often, we're resistant to maintaining the status quo. We're experts in activating the imagination, working collaboratively, and in communications. So what art can do in its various forms is it can help us see the changes that might not yet be visible. It can clarify issues that are either latent or have been marginalized. It can present missing aspects of our society and bring into view the commons in our culture. And it gives us a deeper and wider image of public life. So I'm from the Center for Reworlding, and for 20-something years now, I've been trying to figure out how to engage art and climate. And I've done this as an academic, I've done it as an artist, an advocate, and educator, predominantly working in Australia, Canada, and the US. I'm the co-founder of the Center for Reworlding, which is a 100-year project. It's First Nations led. We have systems and protocols in which we work, and our growing body of critical work, it disrupts a little bit of the climate adaptation and disaster risk engagement. So all of us have been working together for over 10 years or so, and we've come to say that our work is actually deliberate, structured improvisation. In its essence, we give edges because every community is different, every collaborator, every partner, everybody's different. So we find edges and we find common ground in terms of how we might work. And one of the things about improvisation is you never make your partner look bad. So you're constantly bouncing back and forth off each other. So the work that we do, we're a collective of artists, scientists, thinkers, specialists working across climate science, adaptation, resilience, artists, poets, producers. And in essence, what we've been trying to do, many of us have left paid employment because we couldn't do the work at the speed, scale, and scope. And so we've collaborated and we do this work that we call joy work. And t-shirts, we get to have a bit of collateral. And so these are some of our projects. And I just wanted to highlight the Bilia, which is launching at the end of the month. It is a relational mapping software that will help people working in disaster, climate, the arts, and communities to connect. So it's not on the collecting of data, but it's actually about the relationships that we have to one another. And we are also part of Australia's national peak body on arts and climate. And so we'll be doing quite a bit of work. And so anybody who might be thinking about COP, coming to Australia, please get in touch. So you might be wondering why you have a straw in your chair. Yeah? Okay. I'm giving you a tool. Okay. So you might want to just hold up your straw for a second. And for those of you that are online, you don't have a straw, but you can imagine them. I smuggled this one in from America because there's plastic straws in America. If I was to do, I could do a 90-minute exercise with you with just this straw. Okay. What I want you to do is just off the top of your head, think of as many things as you possibly can think of in terms of what you can do with this straw. Okay. And while you're doing that, if you have a pen, you can write it down. We're going to talk about the word creativity. Did you know it was the #1 word on LinkedIn? So it's valued, right? But it's also largely understood. So when we think about a straw and all the different things that we can do with a straw, what would happen is, I'm going to show you this little continuum. It's called the creativity continuum. If we keep coming up with all the different uses for this straw, the longer we spend with this straw, the more ideas we come up with, yeah? And so we keep on going, and then we start generating more ideas. If we were in a group environment, you can do this in a group environment. You just pass the straw around and you ask people what this straw is used for. And what often happens is you get, in the beginning, everybody says, oh, you can drink out of it, you can blow things, you can pick something out of your ear, you can move water, you can, carry beads in it and so forth. And the longer that you stay with it, all of a sudden this straw becomes magic. It does all of these amazing things. And so what happens is, in this continuum, you start to get to crazy, nuanced ideas, right? This part in the beginning, it's the done before, the didactic, the boring, the reactive, outcomes-based, solutions-focused. Often the experts speak first. It's box-ticking exercises. How many people have been to a community engagement event and the brainstorming is after lunch and you're given 45 minutes? Right? How many great ideas come out of that? Right? So somewhere between, boring, we've done this before, and these sort of wild ideas, this is where we put people on the moon. This is where we come up with devices like this that can do everything, yeah? So we need to spend more time in the middle. We need to spend more time generating ideas and thinking and talking to other people in terms of getting to that interesting bit in the middle. So I'm going to do a little bit of a case study here. So a lot of us were working in Australia around art and climate for a really long time, and then we got this really difficult prime minister. And we decided that we were going to start a program. We're going to rehearse climate-related disasters. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we contacted a lot of people in emergency services, from the International Red Cross to state emergency services. We brought in some academics. We wanted to create what was a transdisciplinary project, something we'd never done before. So we were all going to sort of make new knowledge together. And we came up with this methodology, and what it was is that we were in North Melbourne Town Hall, which is Melbourne's leading performing arts venue, and this project that was just seeded ended up becoming a 6-year project that led to some policy change. And what we wanted to ask throughout this project is, knowing what we know about climate, how can we plan and cope with forecasted scope and scale of climate change induced extreme weather events, while acknowledging the socioeconomic inequalities and how these impacts affect equity-denied groups. So over the course between 2016, 2020, and 2022, we rehearsed a flood, a heat wave. We worked at the Peter Doherty Institute, which is the largest institute for virology and immunology in the Southern Hemisphere. We did a pandemic in 2018. And then we started to look at climate-related displacement as well as cumulative impacts. And it wasn't like your normal art. It didn't fit in a box. The art world didn't know what it was. Emergency services didn't know what it was. But we had a methodology. It was 3 stages of a methodology. We had a lab where we brought everybody into a room. We just flooded the room with information. We spent a lot of time together. Then what we did is we came up with asking these questions, what are we practicing? What risks can we take? Because as an artist and in the speculative space, we can take the risks that emergency services can't take in real life. So, and what could we be preparing to, responding from? And so some of the questions there, like what's the data, we could ask the questions that might not be able, you wouldn't be able to ask necessarily in a constrained environment. And so we called this playing in the dark, this dramaturgical methodology that allows experimentation and risk-taking and humility, where failure and risk become learning together ingredients. In over 6 years of doing this project, we built a lot of trust over this, and we started to speak a common language about what we were doing. Jonathan Craig, who's a writer, he said, we're dealing with very serious content, but we can still have fun in the speculative spaces. It's what actually keeps us going. This is just a small constellation map of some of the relationships within the Refuge project itself. And now we've built a software platform very similar to here. So what we're hoping is that it'll help people to stop reinventing the wheel. I can go, hey, Mikalisi, you're in Tonga. Latai was doing this project. We're looking for an artist to be a part of a project that we're doing in Fiji, or you're an expert in displacement. We need a speaker for here, Sarah, can you introduce me to Etel? So it's working deeply in the relational. So what we've learned over time, this is rapid fire. We have learned in this project from our partners and the University of Melbourne that's done all of our evaluations, is that artists can engage with the aesthetic of the emergency spectacle. They can create forums for communities to come together, create settings for intimate sharing, collaborate within and across interdisciplinary boundaries. They can activate sensorial experiences, the open possibilities for the transference of knowledge. They can choreograph opportunities for other bodies to participate. They can activate learning through open-ended pathways, play, speculate, imagine, rehearse in private and public spaces, provoke and make visible the invisible, create conditions for care for strangers, bridge cultural divides and recreate worlds that should have been. They can make us dance in unison. They can apply risk differently, invite us to play. Li Shenglong invented a game around communicating a pandemic. We had like 2,000 people that came through Arts House. And we went back to a lot of these people, and then when the pandemic hit, they understood the language of pandemics. So quite a fascinating project. They can unite us through oral histories and food. They can remind us of lost histories. Share culture, oh, that's my emergency app just going off. Share cultural traditions. They can share stories of resilience through music, help us connect and have empathy for a stranger, create experiential learning environments. This project was about urban heat transfer, working with kids. They can rally us to work together for a common objective and create intimate spaces for reflection. So this was an Indigenous knowledge keeper that looked at disaster recovery centers and said, what if we actually had a reflection pool that was set up? And they can remind us that despite our differences, we are all in this together. And so I brought some collateral that's at the back there in terms of refuge displacement, and there's also the evaluation report in the QR code resource box that you can learn more about that. I'm just gonna check my time here. And on your chair, you have some tea, and I'm gonna come back to that, but it comes from this project here called portage. Portage is from my culture, where it means to carry your canoe over navigatable waters, and once you get over it, you reach a destination and you determine where you go next. And so over 3 years, I worked with 300 members of different people from refugee and migrant backgrounds, because it became very apparent that the knowledge was in the people, not necessarily in the emergency services, and a lot of decisions were being made to them because we hadn't found a way to communicate with all of our different languages. This project here was flipping the script essentially on who the expert was. And so we built some gigantic boats, we built some gigantic shelters, and we were led by Indigenous knowledge keepers in terms of these practices. And what we found is that, you know, through collaboration, we don't need to know it all, we just need to know what our gifts are, what we have, what we need, and what we can offer, and find out how we can collaborate and plug and play. So what happened as a result of this work is that the City of Melbourne, a part of their municipal emergency plan, they have to do a rehearsal, or have what's the word? A rehearsal essentially with all of the emergency services. And in 2022, they asked 3 of us, some of the artists from Refuge, to come in and actually design, co-create and design and facilitate their own emergency drill exercise with community. And because we were doing the work with community already, the community members came, whereas that hadn't actually happened. And the biggest thing in the evaluation was that we were told that to expect half the people to leave by lunchtime, and only 3 people left, and they came up and apologized for leaving. So they even enjoyed the process. So difficult content, but we had different experts in the room that could speak to the content. So we could actually enjoy and create an experience on this. So there's some publications on the Refuge Project that you can follow up with. So I'm now going to do a segue here, and I'm going to invite the other presenters that are coming up. Thank you. Great. Thank you. And I think those are, okay. So now we're moving on to the next segment. We've heard about the challenges, we've heard about some creative methods. Now we're going to hear some case studies of effective practices where there's lots of moving parts, lots of different actors, but working together to mitigate and respond to some of the challenges affecting the Philippines as well as the Caribbean. So we have a video up first of the Philippines giving insight into the innovative resilience program that's preventing displacement, and it's focused on water access and food security. And then we're going to have Miss Irene Damalo have a chat with us, a short chat with us from the government of Philippines here. And then we're going to move on to a video from the IOM looking at practices in Bangladesh. And then we're going to have a short interview with Miss Michelle Forbes representing SEDEMA.
The Republic of the Philippines, an archipelagic nation of more than 7,000 islands, is globally recognized not only for its biodiversity and cultural wealth, but also for its vulnerability to natural hazards. According to the World Risk Index, the Philippines has been ranked the most at-risk country in the world for 3 consecutive years, underscoring both its high exposure to hazards and its limited coping capacities. From the eruption of Taal, Mayon, and Canlaon volcanoes to the devastation of Typhoon Haiyan, Kaini, Trami, and Mani, and the Mindanao earthquakes, millions of Filipino families have faced displacement, often multiple times over. These events highlight the urgent need for resilient and adaptive systems that protect lives and restore dignity. With the threats of climate change, disasters are expected to be more severe and destructive. To keep up with the evolving disaster landscape, the state established the Predictive Analytics for Humanitarian Response, a data-driven tool that identifies the most disaster-prone and vulnerable communities. By analyzing hazard history, socioeconomic data, and environmental factors, it helps the state preposition supplies, prioritize response, and tailor interventions more effectively. Additionally, to address both immediate needs and long-term resilience, the state has embraced innovation. Over 6,800 sub-projects were implemented through the National Community-Driven Development Program. This includes flood control systems, evacuation centers, slope protection works, and isolation facilities, all identified and prioritized by the communities themselves. Through this innovation, communities are empowered, ensuring that emergency needs are addressed through locally driven sub-projects integrated into the existing development plans of the local government units, while promoting flexibility and accountability, thereby reducing displacements during disasters. Further strengthening adaptive capacity, the state launched Project Lawa at Binhi, which addresses water insecurity and food insufficiency, 2 critical dimensions of disaster vulnerability. Lawa constructs and rehabilitates vital water systems, while Binhi promotes disaster-resilient farming and urban gardening for food security. Through Project Lawa at Binhi, the Philippine government assists families in coping with prevailing stressors while simultaneously engaging them in activities that cultivate long-term resilience against future hazards. Hence, disaster-induced displacement is mitigated as communities in heat-affected areas did not leave due to a stable and secure food supply. These multi-layered interventions transform recovery into resilience by equipping communities with knowledge, resources, and income-generating opportunities. The Philippine government fosters environments where displacement does not lead to prolonged suffering, but rather to informed rebuilding and strengthened capacities. Resilience is not a post-disaster outcome, it is a pre-disaster commitment, and by identifying who is most at risk, where they are, and what they need, we enable targeted, coordinated, and effective action. This is how we turn exposure into preparedness and vulnerability into strength for a Philippines that not only survives adversity, but emerges stronger from it.
Welcome, Ms. Irene Dumla. Thank you for sharing this video with us from the Philippines, and I understand that you have a further comment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jen. The video that you've just watched speaks volumes. But allow me, please, Jen, to reiterate that the Philippines live daily with the realities of a complex convergence of risk, being one of the most hazard-exposed countries. So these are not abstract concepts. These are actually lived experiences. And so we are making a deliberate and necessary shift from reactive responses to anticipatory action. We are no longer waiting for the next wave of displacement. We are actually choosing to act decisively, inclusively, and sustainably. So to reduce the risk of displacement, we strengthen the adaptive and transformative capacities of our communities using community-driven development approaches to ensure that resilience building efforts are not only integrated and inclusive, but that they serve the long-term vision of human security and sustainable development. Thank you very much for watching the Philippines Experience.
Thank you, Irene. I loved that video, I just have to say. So now we're going to switch over and return to Bangladesh. People are displaced for various reasons, but all are affected. In this video, we're going to learn from IOM how people from Cox's Bazar work together to prevent disaster risk and how art is used as a tool in this sense for DRR raising awareness and disaster recovery.
Nestled in the southeastern corner of Bangladesh, Cox's Bazar is renowned for its sweeping stretch of coastline, the longest uninterrupted beach in the world. Here, the Bay of Bengal meets the shore in a rhythmic dance, while forested hills rise gently inland, creating a striking contrast of sea and land. Cox's Bazar is also the site of the world's largest refugee settlement. Since 2017, over 1 million Rohingya people have fled violence in Myanmar, seeking refuge in camps that are situated in a region that is highly vulnerable to natural hazards. Throughout the year, these settlements face recurring threats from seasonal cyclones and heavy monsoon floods to sudden fires and landslides. Here, prevention begins before disaster can strike. In the camps, volunteers move with purpose, guided by experience and rooted in community.
বালিশের টাইমের মধ্যে ওরে নিচে কি আছে রিসি হাইন্ডার করে আছে বড় বড় তো হাইন্ডার ও তো ওর নিচে আছে আমরা কি করি যত এবার আগুন আর তার মানে আইয়ার আরে বল মাদা আয়া তার আর মানে হই দি দিন নাকি আদা তো ল্যাং আছে হামিললা আছে তার আর কি সেব জায়গা মাল লজারে আসর কেন্দ্র লজারে জায়গা মারি দিবে আর তার আর মানে দেখা দেখো মা সিঙ্গেল আলামত ফাই এটা দেখো মাদা আর মানে কি করি মুখোমুখি হই আর মানে সিঙ্গেল 4 নম্বর উল্লে মত আর সিঙ্গেল ফেলাক তুলিয়ারে মানুষের মানে কি করে দি উশার করে দি
In the Rohingya camps, communities are learning to respond swiftly. Cyclone drills, fire drills, and trained volunteers mean fewer lives lost. When disaster strikes, these trained volunteers take the lead as first responders.
বই ভালোলে ঘরত দুয়ারত যায় কোমার মানুষেরা অনতো কেন করে বাসি ফারিবা হ্যাঁ হইরে ইন ওয়ানা সেশন কল দি ইন সব ইকল দেখাই ইরিয়া তাহলে জ্বরের টাইমের মাঝে জ্বরের মেসেজ কল দি হাইন্দার ওয়ারদ নিসর গুণরে হাইন্দার মেসেজ দি তাহলে হেন্দিলা আগতো যায় রে তারা দুয়ারে দুয়ারে মায়া বানে কলরে ডাকি এহতাগিন সব দেখাই বুঝাইয়া
In Rohingya camps, danger is met with preparation. From stabilizing steep hills, constructing roads, to regularly cleaning the drains, every effort counts. We are thriving every day to find nature-based solution like lime-stabilized soil, LSS, and watershed that creates co-benefits for the disaster-affected community by mitigating risks from cyclone and flood.
এটা কেমন মাঝে বিভিন্ন ধরনের মসিয়ত কল ওইন্দরে বইয়ার বা তো এই নজরিয়া আর মানুষ আর ডাকা আতা ভাইসে মানে মানুষ আছে তো তারা ফাইন্দা ভাঙি যাগৈ হস্তফা ঘরত পানি গলে সিঁড়ি ভাঙি যাগৈ আর রাস্তা গাঁট ঠরা হয়ে যাগৈ ইয়ান আল্লাহ বলি আর আইমতো ইন সাব গড়ি দি ফাইন্দা ভাঙিলে ফাইন্দা আন অরগরি দি সিঁড়ি ভাঙি দিলে সিঁড়ি আন অরগরি দি
Monsoon is very close to our eyes. That's why we are supposed to impart every of the month a DMC meeting before disaster and during the disaster and the post disaster. Whenever any incident happens, within very shortest possible of the time, message just directly goes to the Rohingya communities and then and there they respond. I think this is the output or outcome of the direct coordination and collaboration with all the stakeholders.
Site management team is always at the front line for emergency preparedness and response. Through coordination, information management, and inclusive community engagement, we identify the hazard and risk early, plan for them effectively, and ensure that preparedness systems, response systems are in place. Our disaster risk reduction interventions are for the community, by the community.
In quiet corners of the camp, resilience takes on new forms. Women use jute, recycled plastic, and creativity to support their families and protect the environment.
সে ফেলাস্টিকি নিকে ফালালে ডেঙত ফালালে হসারাও যাবই মানে পানি জমি যাবই তে যদি ফুয়াশায় ফেড়া ছাড়া আনিলে বাজনা আরা কিনিলে যদি ব্যবহার করে হইলে মানে ডেঙর মাঝে সাফ সুতরা থাকে ইবা পানি টানিয়ে নজমের তে আনলা আরাই ভালো ইস্তেমাল করি
When memory lingers and words often fail us, It is through colors that we find our voice. For many in the camp, art is a heartfelt language to express the depths of their untold stories. In the face of disaster, the impacts reach far beyond the physical, touching the fabric of our emotional well-being. Through art, our community connects, shares its stories, finds resilience, and embarks on a healing journey together. Disaster risk reduction is not a single act. It is more than a plan. It is a way of living and surviving the disaster together. In every slope secured, every painting finished, every mat woven, resilience lives on. This is not just survival. This is strength. This is solidarity. This is being stronger together.
Okay, so we've heard from governments, communities, and that some people are displaced across international borders. But what can we do when people need to be evacuated, for instance, across borders? So joining us now is to answer some questions is Miss Michelle Forbes, representing SEDIMA. She's also the National Disaster Coordinator and Director of the National Emergency Management Organization of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So Michelle, so we've heard some examples here of what can be done at the government level and at the community level to prepare for, to avoid, and to respond to disaster displacement. But what's being done at the regional level in the Caribbean when people are displaced across international borders, and how can evacuations be organized across countries?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for having us here. Now, the Caribbean region has already faced complex cross-border displacement, and I will just name a few. Remembering the volcanic eruptions in Montserrat in the late 1990s, when hundreds of persons migrated across the Caribbean islands and also Britain. We would have had Tropical Storm Erica 2015 in Dominica, and of the most recent, Hurricane Maria and Irma that affected Dominica, Antigua, the Virgin Islands, UK, and a few other countries. Now, in the region, pre-existing national and regional instruments do not explicitly address the governance, protection, and coordination protocols required for the movement of people across borders in disaster displacement contexts. The SEDIMA agreement provides foundational legal basis for collective disaster response among its 20 participating states, of which St. Vincent and the Grenadines is one. However, more is needed to address specific operational complexities of cross-border displacement. These gaps we are seeing often result in inconsistent response from country to country and increased vulnerability across displaced populations. SEDIMA has provided guidance for its member states in the development of a modern evacuation policy and plan that countries can themselves adopt and implement. In response, SEDIMA and the International Office for Migration would have partnered to develop a regional guideline. So we are developing the regional guidelines for cross-border displacement and evacuation. And these guidelines seek to promote harmonized protocols for cross-border evacuations across the member states. They clarify their institutional roles and responsibilities among sending and receiving states using a human security lens. Through the partnership, they have been supporting contingency planning and preparedness that considers transboundary movement, because our islands, we are all sisters and brothers, to ensure that humanitarian principles and protection standards, particularly for vulnerable groups, are upheld. So these draft guidelines will actually be presented to the Council of Ministers meeting and the Technical Advisory Committee of Tax for endorsement across countries. In the region also, through the OECS Commission, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, we have been also working with the IOM in terms of looking at cross-boundary displacement. We tend to work better among the islands or individual bilaterals. And for example, in 2004, when Grenada would have been impacted by Hurricane Ivan, we in St. Vincent and the Grenadines would have accommodated students from that country who wanted to continue their education. And we saw that happening in 2017, in 2015, 2017, with Erica and Maria across countries. And what we did, and many of the countries did, is treated the persons who were displaced, many of our nationals who were living in these countries for quite some time. When they came back to our shores, we treated them the same as if they were displaced internally. They did not get any differential treatment. So we are seeing that there are different efforts across the region, working with the IOM, through CDMA, through the OECS, and internally within our countries to ensure that displaced populations are given the dignity and treated the same across all islands.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. So in the wake of Hurricane Beryl, in June 2024, entire islands in the as you mentioned, the Grenadines were reduced to rubble and communities uprooted, homes and livelihoods lost. In our conversations with SEDIMA, one thing that came out of that was around mental health care. And so how are countries in the region together safeguarding the mental health of the people experiencing disaster displacement?
On July 1st last year, so almost a year ago, we would have been facing the Hurricane Beryl bearing down on our islands in the southeastern Caribbean, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit Martinique. And this is where we had almost an entire islands being displaced, small islands of a few thousand persons being displaced. Now, the mental health and psychosocial support is one that is often forgotten or not sustained. And I want to stress the word sustain, because we tend to have interventions immediately after the emergency, but a year later, and we are seeing the impacts 6 months later, around the Christmas time, when people are celebrating the local traditions. And I mean, I'm fearful coming up the anniversary of the Hurricane Beryl, and we are seeing it affecting the elderly persons in particular. We have quite a few deaths in terms of losing persons who have been elderly. Now, the mental health and psychosocial support services emerge as a critical need in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl last year, particularly among the vulnerable, the children, the elderly, and the first responders. Even before landfall, we saw the anxiety and anticipation. And I remember sitting in my office with the head of the Met Services when we got a call from CDMA, and they said, look, we lost all contact with Carriacou, and we believe that island is devastated. And I turned to him and I said, if Carriacou is devastated, we have also probably lost our islands of Union Island, Mairo, Petit St. Vincent, and Palm Island. Those are resort islands. And while we have made efforts and seen progress in post-impact of the whole mental health and psychosocial support services, Hurricane Beryl really brought to the forefront the urgent need for more coordinated and sustained regional approach. Not just among the regional response mechanism teams, which are deployed by CDMA to support the regions, and they can be deployed into the country sometimes 2 to 3 weeks or even longer. And these are security forces and also personnel from specialized personnel from around the regional institutions and from CDMA itself. So recognizing that we are small states and our capacity for mental health can be very limited, we decided to move to establish the Caribbean Psychosocial Support Interagency Consortium, CAPSIC, which was launched in Grenada in October 2024. And this is co-chaired by the Caribbean Alliance of National Psychological Associations, CAMPA, and the University of the West Indies Disaster Risk Reduction Center. This grouping brings together technical and humanitarian partners to work together in an effort to mainstream mental health and psychosocial support across all phases of disaster risk management, from prevention to recovery. The consortium has also been leading efforts to establish a standby mental health and psychosocial support search teams under the whole regional response mechanism coordinated by CDMA for deploying to participate in states on the request of the states. Grenada has already benefited from this deployment of the mental health and psychosocial support team, which was deployed as part of the regional response mechanism. And this is really important in terms of having our regional persons who are deployed, because you face, I mean, like imagine going into Union Island last year and there was nothing there really. We had to do, the response teams had to do a makeshift at the damaged airport, setting up camp there, and you didn't know what you were going to face. So the whole mental health, especially of not just the persons who are impacted, but the first responders who support the the response and support the recovery efforts is really important. I mean, I always give a story. We had a volcanic eruption in 2021 in my country.
Excuse me, Michelle.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can you save that story till lunchtime? Because we're
That's
going to
okay.
have lunch at 1:30 and it'll be brought in and we can continue some of these conversations because storytelling is really important. And
Yeah.
and thank you both for the solidarity work that you're doing to mitigate displacement in both of your regions. You're more than welcome to stay here. But I'm going to call up right now Professor Walter Kalin. We're going to do things a little bit differently in this little session. If you're welcome to come and sit back there, but you're also welcome to stay up here, whatever your preference is. So this next part here, oops, here we go. So would you like to come and use one of these mics here? Good to see you in person. So instead of a normal, a conventional Q&A, what we've asked to observer responders. So given what we heard today, to think about their experience and their expertise and to think through some of there's going to be some provocations. So joining us is Mr. Josh Knowles, who will go first, and then Professor Walter Kalin going second. So, as you know, Josh is the sketch writer working behind the scenes there, live sketching, and Professor Walter Kalin is the envoy of the chair of the Platform on Disaster and Displacement and the chair of the advisory committee of the platform. Okay. Oh, actually, Eric, can I just get this one slide up first, and then we'll switch to Josh there? Thank you. So these are the questions. Yep. Oh, I'll just go. Okay. So, given the disciplinary expertise and what we've heard from the different community, country, and regional experiences regarding government and community-led mitigation responses, creative exercises to prepare and recover, what excited you most or alarmed you the most? What are the questions that we're not asking? What did you hear today that was new, innovative, or could be scaled with investment or lead to policy changes? And what stories will you tell when you leave here today? Some of these questions I also encourage you all to think about. You don't have to answer all four. You can answer one, two, or them all. But I'm going to hand it over to Josh first. And Josh, you have about 3-4 minutes there, yeah?
Okay, hi. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me here today. It's a great honor to be part of such a great event. Okay, so I heard that this event would be reported somewhat like a news show or like a TV news. So I've tried to create a kind of animated continuous drawing that maybe reflects some of the talking points from today as a kind of a news story. So what I'm going to do is I don't know, can people see my screen? Are you able to see my screen there? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of my drawing and I'm going to just let it play whilst I speak. So let me see if I can get this going. And in terms of the questions, I'll answer those at the end of this little sequence. So I'm going to press, hopefully this will work. Can you see this? No, hold on one sec. Hold on, small technical issue. It's not playing back the way I'd hoped. Let's try that once more. Okay, that's not happening. Okay, so what I will do is I'll just go back to the beginning. Sorry about this. Bear with me 1 second. Okay.
Josh, do you want a minute and we can
Yes, please.
Okay,
Thank you. Yeah.
You work those details out and we'll just are you ready if we switch over to you? Yeah. All right. And would you like you're not ready to do the rock star move?
I have to displace you. Sorry for that, and thank you. Well, you heard the figures, 10 years of displacement. 2015, 2025. 2015 was the adoption of the Sendai framework, and that's why we are all here. And at that time, it was really contested whether people dealing with disaster risk reduction should talk about displacement and migration. It was hard to get those few mentions into the Sendai framework. What was really impressive to see is how far we have advanced. We know today, we heard it today, what's happening, what it means for people. We heard about what can be done, so many good practices. Not in this room, but in other rooms, we also are discussing about the international standards, about the governance, the financing mechanism. Nothing perfect, but we have done a lot of progress. But then, sometimes I feel events like this, that's kind of a black hole or a bubble. It's our community of disaster risk reduction people dealing with human mobility issues, but in a way we are a bubble, aren't we? We are working in silos. DRR silo, climate change silo, migration silo, and so on. What do we need to do? Of course, first we need to break these silos. We need to better connect. So much has been said about climate change, yes. And we know, unless we're really making progress with reducing the emissions, with adapting, all of our DRR discussions are reaching their limits. And more importantly, we need to change the perspective. See all the flowers? That's the communities. That's a local experience. That's the agency of people, of communities, of local authorities, of governments. And we need to better connect our top-down approaches of the international community, including the diplomats. We need to better link them to the bottom-up activities and approaches. And we need to better connect all these flowers, all these communities, all these practices. Because the big challenge today is not knowing. Yes, we need more. We need to know more, but we have fundamental good knowledge. We need not to find out what to do. We know what we need to do, but we have to scale up. Now it's isolated flowers. Bring them together, connect, and in that sense, change the perspective. And then the black hole here is no longer a black hole. It is something that supports what is happening at the levels. And that's, to me, the message that came out. That's my big hope. Let the flowers bloom. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. I think this idea of the bubble, right? We also do this generationally. From a First Nations perspective, we always have our children in our environments, in our learning environments. We always have our elders because they remind us of our past and they remind us of our present and of our future. And so it's the geographical bubbles, it's the disciplinary bubbles, it's all the bubbles. How are you going, Josh?
Yes, sorry about that. I think I'm ready now.
You ready? All right.
Yeah, so it's a kind of an animation that I'm going to play. Shall I just go ahead and play it?
Yeah, that's wicked.
Okay, let's do it. Let's see what happens. So here's my page. Here's my drawing. It's a continuous drawing. We've got the bin fire. We have this, the story of Bangladesh. the rice mills and the displaced people there in Chile, how people are working together as communities to make things work and plug the gaps that are creating problems. Then we went to the data point, which is how do we find this missing data? How can we be more prepared? Then we came to the incredible dance there from Tonga. And that led to the poetry. And then here we go with the joy work, the 100-year plan, and asking what is creativity and how can it be used in these issues? How can we harness the creative minds and the knowledge of local people to create local action? Then we moved into the innovative resilience piece, and we talked about water, water access and food security, preparedness. And then we moved into the video around risk resilience, again in Bangladesh. And then finally, we spoke about the situation in the Caribbean and evacuation and the importance of mental health safety. So that's my little time-lapse drawing of today's discussion points as I heard them and as I imagined them onto my canvas. And the questions that came up, what would be my takeaway from today and what would be something to take forward? Well, my takeaway is certainly that how strong community action is and how resilient communities can be if they're given the right tools. So that would be my big takeaway. And secondly, if we can have kind of established voices supporting the community, I think we can work wonders. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. So this is sort of the formal end of our program, but thank you, Walter and Josh, for your responses and to be thinking through these different lenses. You know, if we had time, we might call out, you know, maybe a medical doctor from Cuba, a group of teenagers from the Cook Islands, an imam from Turkey, an indigenous elder from Turtle Island, a sociologist from Brazil, a cultural theorist from Norway. We might get more intergenerational and geographical or, you know, other disciplinary responses. And what would we hear from what we heard from today? We would move probably beyond, you know, our 3 to 5 year time cycles. We'd start to uncover wisdom in different communities and in different people. So we all have a role in addressing these challenges. It's thinking about what is our role, you know, the specific to the systemic, and how might we audit ourselves in terms of our skills and our knowledges and our capacity to do deep, long relational collaborations. And so that's the invitation in terms of closing for you today. You know, tea plays an important role in many cultures in terms of rituals and ceremony. It can bring us together in friendship. It can calm us when we're in crisis. For those of you that are in the room, you have tundra tea, which is an indigenous tea from Turtle Island. It's also called Labrador tea. It's good for stomach aches, for lung health, and for your digestion. You just take a couple leaves and you put hot water on it. It's not meant for people who are pregnant or chest feeding. And for those of you that are online, I encourage you to select one of your favorite teas. So after we close here, you know, I'd like you to think about, you know, maybe carrying on some of these conversations that you had today. What are the stories you're going to tell? We don't need to replicate and restart the wheel. What we need is to do deep collaboration and figure out, you know, what do you have, what do you need, what can you offer, and how do we plug and play to do joy work and do deep, long collaboration. So on behalf of the PDD and the partners for the Joy Work report, I'll put the music on a sec. There's another event that's coming up shortly, and it's going to be over in 2.4 in Plenary B. That will be run by the PDD. And then there's the QR code as well for you. So all of the presenters have shared the resources and presentations for you. So there we go. Go well. Thank you.